Hey guys, tonight we're heading somewhere unexpected. Picture this, a warm, sea salt breeze whispering through swaying palms, the rhythmic chirp of tree frogs in the distance, and the moonlight dancing across a lagoon as hammocks gently rock beneath a canopy of stars. You're not aboard a ship, not anymore. You're on the north coast of Madagascar, circa the late 1600s. And your companions? Pirates. Or, well, former pirates. Sun-kissed, sandal-wearing, democracy-trying pirates. You've just landed in the middle of one of history's strangest utopian experiments, a tropical republic built not on blood and booty, but on shared meals, mutual respect, and an oddly effective pirate constitution. Of course, you probably won't survive this. Not because of the pirates, they're surprisingly chill about newcomers, but the mosquitoes, sunstroke, and occasional lemur stampedes might have something else to say. Still, for now, just breathe in the island air. It smells like roasted breadfruit and wood smoke, with maybe a whiff of salt-dried socks. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're tuning in from somewhere special, let me know in the comments. Drop your location and local time. It's always soothing to see this sleepy little corner of history stretching across the world. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. Your bare feet sink into the warm sand as you shuffle up from the beach, where a broken rowboat lies half swallowed by tide and barnacle. You're not the only one coming ashore. Dozens of others, all equally sunburnt and sea-staggered, pull themselves from the wreckage. These aren't the scruffy cartoon pirates you'd expect. Sure, they've got some tattoos, maybe a few gold teeth, but they're more tired than terrifying. They don't brandish swords. They lug sacks of dried fish and rusty carpentry tools. This wasn't supposed to happen. You were supposed to raid a merchant ship, divide the loot, maybe retire to some dismal tavern with a parrot and an unfinished sea shanty. But a storm decided otherwise. The ship splintered like a dry biscuit against Madagascar's jagged reefs, and now here you are, alive, and maybe, just maybe, ready for a new kind of life. One by one, your comrades collapse into the shade of banyan trees, or rinse their wounds in the river. Nobody's in charge. That guy who used to bark orders during storms? He's too busy digging a pit latrine. Someone finds mangoes. Someone else finds a goat. You just sit there, stunned, wondering if this might be the best place you've ever accidentally ended up. The first night is strange. There's no captain assigning shifts, no watch schedule. Just an unspoken agreement to keep the fire going, to share what little's left of the rum, and to not talk about the wreck. Sleep comes in fits, interrupted by the buzzing of insects and one guy's surprisingly passionate snoring. By morning, things have shifted. Nobody says so out loud, but a rhythm begins forming. You're not pirates anymore. Not really. You're castaways with no ship, no loot, and no real reason to keep stabbing each other over navigation disagreements. Someone starts building a shelter out of driftwood. Someone else draws up a list of supplies. One guy just starts drawing stick figures in the sand and calls it art. Somehow this awkward accidental commune begins to feel functional. You can hear birds, hundreds of them, chattering high above in the forest canopy. The island is alive, and it's giving you a chance. And you, still crusted with salt and sand, are starting to believe it might just be better than life at sea. And as the sun climbs higher over your new home, someone, somewhere, makes a joke about electing a coconut as mayor, and honestly, no one disagrees. By your second week on shore, you've officially become more land creature than sea rat. Your beard, if you've got one, is less rakish and more tangled moss. Your clothes, patched with palm fronds and stolen curtain bits from the wreck, flap like confused laundry in the breeze. But hey, at least you've stopped tasting salt water every time you blink. The community, because yes, it's starting to feel like a community now, is taking shape. The sandy clearing where you all first collapsed has grown into something resembling a village. Hammocks swing from tree limbs. Makeshift huts cluster together under the trees. And someone has even carved a signpost out of driftwood that reads, "Better here than dead." There's no boss, no captain, no absolute authority. Instead, decisions seem to rise up naturally, like the tide. You gather under the biggest breadfruit tree when a problem comes up. Who gets the last spear? Whether it's acceptable to use someone else's hammock without asking whether dried mango should count as currency. The answer, more often than not, is decided by group mumbling until someone shrugs and everyone agrees. It's low-key anarchy, but also weirdly effective. You learn quickly that not all your new neighbors are ex-pirates. Some of the folks around you were deckhands who never wanted to fight. Others were sailors who jumped ship years ago and drifted to Madagascar looking for something slower, something kinder. A few are Malagasy locals, curious about these sunburned fools who seem incapable of boiling water without setting a palm tree on fire. And rather than chase you off, many of them stay. They help. They share food. They teach you, sometimes with quiet amusement, that coconuts don't just crack themselves open if you yell at them. Among them is a quiet man with a wooden leg and a voice like a tired river. He doesn't say much, but when he does, people listen. He talks about sharing tools, planting crops, and, most curiously, about how no one should be in charge all the time. Power, he says, should float around like a canoe on calm water. This sticks in your head, partly because it sounds poetic, partly because it's the first time someone's made politics sound vaguely relaxing. And that's when it starts. The meetings. You wouldn't call them government, not yet, but they happen regularly, under the breadfruit tree, or next to the well, someone dug using a frying pan and a lot of swearing. No one calls roll, and there are no gavels or powdered wigs, thank heavens. But there's talking and listening and, believe it or not, voting. Actual voting. One person, sunburnt and barefoot, suggests that no one should take more than they give. Another, chewing sugarcane like it's a career, argues that everyone should do a turn guarding the stores, even if their idea of a weapon is pointing very aggressively. Someone suggests a rotating job schedule. Everyone laughs. Then they try it anyway. And just like that, the bones of a pirate democracy start to grow. There's skepticism, of course. You're pirates. Or at least you were. You're used to taking orders or giving them, not talking about who gets to distribute dried bananas or whether goats have the right of way on walking paths. But slowly, the rhythm sets in. The meetings become expected, even anticipated. You start bringing snacks. Historians still argue whether this sort of proto-democracy came from deep-seated ideals or just a bunch of exhausted men too tired to fight. Some think it was influenced by native Malagasy governance systems. Others say pirates had always practiced a rough version of equality on their ships, voting on captains, dividing loot, assigning tasks. The truth, like a good buried treasure, is probably somewhere in between. What matters is that you feel different. Grounded, seen, heard. You, who used to shout over cannons and waves, now sit under stars debating how many coconuts count as a fine for stealing someone's sandals. It's not paradise, not yet, but it's something better than you had before. And you're beginning to realize this accidental society might just be worth staying alive for. It starts with a rumor, like most oddities in pirate life. Someone whispers that this peaceful community, the one with mango votes and hammock etiquette, isn't the only one. They say there's a name for it too. A grand one. Libertalia. You squint. Libertalia sounds like a made-up place in a sailor's fever dream, but the name keeps popping up in hushed conversations around the fire, in half-finished tales traded with passing crews, and in the scribbled notes of one particularly ambitious ex-quartermaster who insists he's writing a book. A real one, with chapters. According to the legend, Libertalia was a hidden pirate haven, founded on the northern coast of Madagascar by a mysterious Captain Misson and his oddly philosophical friend, a defrocked priest named Caraccioli. These weren't your usual plunder and pillage types. They supposedly envisioned a society built not on greed, but on fairness, reason, and a shared distaste for monarchy and slavery. Bold ideas for men who once stole sugar by the barrel. The tale goes that Misson and Caraccioli rallied a crew of like-minded rogues, set up shop on Madagascar's shores, and welcomed everyone, escaped slaves, former sailors, indigenous islanders, into a radical experiment in equality. No kings, no masters. Just freedom and fruit, and possibly parrots in positions of authority. You laugh the first time you hear it. Sounds like bedtime nonsense. A pirate republic? Next you'll hear they had dental plans, but then the story grows roots. New arrivals mention it unprompted. One traveler swears he saw the remnants of Libertalia, a vine-choked fort, a tattered flag, and a plaque that read, "Here, we were free." It's intoxicating. You, who once fought over crumbs of gold and cursed every officer above you, now feel the pull of that word. Liberty. Even if the original Libertalia never existed, not as the books claim, it's a banner you and your ragtag crew might just want to pick up anyway. Historians still argue whether Libertalia was ever real or just 18th century fan fiction. The earliest known account comes from a book published in 1724, A General History of the Pirates, by the mysterious Captain Charles Johnson, possibly a pen name for Daniel Defoe. Some believe it's pure invention, a moral tale disguised as history. Others think it's based on slivers of truth, pirate colonies that blended myth and memory, lost to jungle and time. Regardless of the facts, you can't help but be drawn to the idea. A pirate utopia. An anti-empire. A place where men and women once tossed aside flags and ranks and said, "Let's try something else." Even if Misson and Caraccioli were fictional, the yearning behind the tale is real, and it matches what's blooming around you now. So one warm evening, someone brings up the name. "What if we are Libertalia?" he asks, mouth full of roasted plantain. There's a long pause, and then, of course, someone votes to make it official. You don't print flags or carve plaques. You don't have a national anthem, unless you count that one guy who hums sea shanties while stirring stew. But the name sticks. It's whispered during the morning fish sort, chuckled over when a parrot tries to steal someone's breakfast, and painted on the driftwood welcome sign in glorious, uneven letters. Libertalia, spelled wrong, crossed out, spelled again. It might be legend. It might be fiction, but you're living it anyway. And as the moon rises over your village of sunburned dreamers, one of your neighbors strums a tune on a cracked fiddle and sings softly. No kings, no crowns, just hammocks and hounds. It's not catchy. But you all hum along. You wake up to chickens pecking at your feet, and the gentle smell of overcooked breadfruit drifting through camp. A lemur perches in the rafters of your hut, judging you. The breeze carries laughter from down by the river, where someone's invented a game involving coconuts, sticks, and a complicated set of rules no one agrees on. In short, it's a normal day in your oddball pirate democracy. And today's topic of discussion under the breadfruit tree, leadership. Specifically, the lack thereof. Someone's annoyed that no one's taking charge of the food stores. Another thinks there should be a leader, just a small one. Maybe a suggestion, Captain. Others argue that the whole point of Libertalia is not having a captain. No one should tell anyone else what to do, especially not someone wearing that ridiculous hat made of banana leaves. Eventually, the group does what it usually does, shrugs, jokes, and mumbles toward consensus. No captains. Still. But with one twist, everyone gets a say, and tasks rotate like coconuts in a tide pool. So today, You're in charge of the cooking fire. Yesterday you were on goat watching duty. Tomorrow, you'll probably be digging a latrine or trying to teach a parrot not to swear. No one holds a job for long. That's the point. Power, if you can call it that, is like a hot yam. Nobody wants to hold on to it for too long. This makes for a very particular kind of society. Decisions are slow, messy, and often require 3 arguments, 2 naps, and at least 1 interpretive dance before being settled. But they get made, together. And believe it or not, this model wasn't unheard of in the wider pirate world. Historians note that many pirate crews actually voted on key matters: who the captain would be, what targets to pursue, how loot would be divided. Captains could be removed by majority vote, and some ships even had written codes, articles, detailing behavior, punishments, and fair shares. It wasn't perfect, but it was a far cry from the rigid naval hierarchies they'd escaped from. In Libertalia, that ethos gets turned up to 11. Everyone has a voice, even that guy who only speaks in limericks. You've sat through debates about hammock placement, goat curfews, and whether the community needs a shared bathhouse or a shared chicken coop first. Spoiler, it's the chicken coop. One morning, a dispute breaks out about the fishing net. Who owns it? Who can use it? Does it belong to the person who found it, the person who mended it, or the crab who currently lives in it? Rather than duel over it, which would be the old way, the community votes. A drawstring pouch full of shells serves as the ballot box. Everyone drops in a pebble or shell to cast a yes or no on a shared fishing net policy. The final count is 16 for shared access, 3 for private ownership, 1 for only the crab, and 2 shells that look suspiciously like someone voted twice. The result: the net is shared. The crab is gently relocated. Democracy, 1. Chaos, 0. Historians still argue whether these pirate communities were idealistic or just practical. Was their egalitarianism born from lofty Enlightenment thinking? Or did it simply work better when no one wanted a mutiny at breakfast? Likely both. When you've spent your life obeying tyrants with wigs, letting everyone vote on when to eat and sleep feels downright revolutionary. There's also a surprising softness here. Disagreements don't always spiral into violence. Instead, people retreat, reflect, then return with calmer voices, and often a snack. There's something disarming about trying to argue while holding a boiled yam. And in the evenings, when the stars come out and the fire crackles low, you can almost believe this strange, salt-crusted village is the future. No kings. No masters. Just you, your friends, and the slow, silly miracle of shared governance. Even if the parrot still swears. The parchment is surprisingly well kept, considering it was found folded inside someone's shoe, smudged, slightly torn, and covered in suspicious mango stains. It's what passes for a legal document around here. The Pirate Code of Conduct. You and a few others sit cross-legged in the sand as the parchment is unfurled with great ceremony. Someone tries to read it in a booming official voice, but gets the hiccups halfway through, so the rest is delivered between giggles and polite coughing. The contents? Surprisingly thoughtful. Not bad for a group of ex-buccaneers who once solved problems with cannonballs and shouting. Clause 1. No man shall strike another during a meal. Clause 2. All goods taken in raids or from overturned boats of fruit shall be divided equally. Clause 3. All members must take turns at cooking, even if their only dish is burnt fish surprise, and so on. It reads like something between a kindergarten classroom agreement and a utopian manifesto. No stealing from your mates. No hoarding food, no sailing off in the night with the community goat, the consequences for infractions. Usually extra chores, a very public shaming, or, if you're really unlucky, latrine duty for a week. You might laugh, but these rules matter. They're the skeleton of this oddball society. They're what make it possible for a band of former pirates, escaped sailors, and skeptical locals to live without collapsing into chaos. And these kinds of codes weren't invented here. Across the golden age of piracy, shipboard articles were often drawn up by consensus, sometimes even signed by the whole crew. They outlined everything from loot splits to lighting candles below deck. Historians point to these documents as early examples of seafaring democracy, even if the punishments involved marooning or whipped mackerels. In Libertalia, the tone is gentler. One guy gets caught sneaking into the mango stash at night. Instead of a flogging, he has to compose and perform a dramatic apology ballad. The ballad, incidentally, becomes a camp favorite. There's a deep logic in this chaos. Everyone's lived under harsh captains or greedy commanders. Here, rules are made together. Justice, such as it is, comes with a side of roasted breadfruit and peer pressure. One particularly memorable moment, the Great Spoon Incident. Two residents claim the same carved spoon, the only one with a curly handle. It almost comes to blows, but the council under the breadfruit tree intervenes. Witnesses are summoned. Character references are made. A proposal to make a second curly spoon is offered. In the end, the spoon is declared communal, with alternating spoon days designated in the logbook. Peace returns. Quirky as it sounds, these little rituals create something precious. Trust. You can leave your hammock without hiding your boots. You can share a meal and not worry someone will stab you for the last yam. There's laughter too, teasing, storytelling, and the occasional mock trial where the defendant is a goat accused of tax evasion. Historians still debate how real these community codes were in pirate havens. Some suggest they were exaggerated by authors like Captain Charles Johnson, meant to entertain rather than record. Others argue that life on the edge of empire demanded new systems, and that even thieves knew cooperation was survival. But here, in this sun-drenched corner of Madagascar, the rules are real. Scrawled in ink and fruit juice, sung in verse, painted on driftwood signs. They grow, shift, evolve with the community. You help revise one yourself. A clause about borrowing hammocks is updated to include return in same degree of droopiness. It passes unanimously. And as night falls, you sit beneath the same breadfruit tree, listening to a pirate with one eye and a love for rhyming couplets read aloud the day's updates. A dog howls in agreement. This is law, this is life. And somehow it works. You used to dream of treasure, gold doubloons, silver goblets, rubies the size of pigeon eggs. Now your most valuable asset is a goat named Clementine and a particularly stubborn patch of cassava root. Welcome to your new life, pirate turned peasant. It's not glamorous. You spend most mornings cursing rocks that refuse to move, and afternoons pulling weeds that seem to multiply whenever you blink. Your hands are permanently dirt-streaked, your back perpetually sore, and your boots, once polished to impress at Caribbean taverns, are now crusted with mud, mango fibers, and an unidentified lizard tail. But despite all this, you're happy, or something resembling it. There's a rhythm here. A peace. You wake up with the sun, tend to your tiny plot of land, swap tools with neighbors, and take pride in things you never thought you'd care about, like straight rows of sugarcane or figuring out how not to accidentally poison yourself with a new berry. You're not alone in this transformation. Around you, other former pirates have taken to farming with the same grim determination they once brought to boarding ships. One man, who used to be called Hatchet Jack, now refers to himself as Pumpkin Jack, and proudly shows off his gourd collection to anyone who'll listen. Another, once a fearsome cannon loader, now raises chickens and knits tiny hats for them. No one knows why. No one asks. The truth is, most of these men and women never wanted to be pirates in the first place. They were press-ganged into service, driven by desperation, or escaping worse lives elsewhere. Plundering was never the dream. Survival was. And now, for the first time, They have a chance to live, really live, without looking over their shoulders or constantly scanning the horizon for sails. Historians still argue whether pirate settlements like this were truly peaceful retirements or just temporary pauses between bouts of looting. Some records suggest that even in havens like Madagascar, piracy continued in some form. Others point to archaeological finds, farming tools, cooking pots, burial sites that suggest many pirates settled permanently and sincerely embraced a quieter life. Here in Libertalia, it seems clear. This isn't a pirate camp preparing for its next raid. It's a village, stubbornly growing from the sand like a coconut sapling. There's even trade. Someone carves spoons, someone else makes sturdy sandals from old sailcloth, and a particularly charismatic woman named Tiva has invented a type of fermented pineapple drink that doubles as insect repellent. You trade half a basket of cassava for 2 flasks of it and wake up with no bites and only a slight headache. Your diet changes too. You start craving greens instead of salt pork. You discover the joys of roasted yam with chili paste. Someone invents a communal stew that's different every day and always slightly suspicious, but warm and filling. You even find yourself bragging about your compost pile to visitors, and you're no longer alone at night. Fires flicker around the camp, not for protection, but for company. You sit with neighbors, swapping stories, singing old sea songs with new verses, and arguing playfully about whose goat is the most emotionally intelligent. It's still Clementine, obviously. You, who once fired grape shot into the hulls of merchant ships, now spend afternoons planting pumpkin seeds and whispering encouragement to your beans. And you can't help but laugh. Because somehow, inexplicably, this feels like victory. No stolen gold, no palace of pearls. Just good dirt, shared soup, and the deep, stubborn satisfaction of building something together. The island is far from empty. Before your lot ever dragged a broken dinghy onto the sand, Madagascar had been humming with life, cultures, and kingdoms for centuries. And now that you're firmly grounded and mostly unarmed, it's time to meet the neighbors. You first encounter them while chasing an escaped chicken into the forest. There, standing beside a massive tamarind tree, is a local woman with a woven basket balanced effortlessly on her head. She watches your chicken escapade with silent amusement. Her name is Farah, and she doesn't say much at first, just raises an eyebrow that somehow communicates 100 years of history and the silent judgment of someone who can grow an entire meal from a handful of seeds and 2 hours of sunlight. Farah is Sakalava, part of a coastal ethnic group with a long history of trade, migration, and complex political systems. She's not alone. Soon you begin meeting others from nearby villages, Antandroy cattle herders from the dry southern plains, marina farmers from the highlands, Betsimisaraka fishers from the east. Madagascar is a patchwork of cultures and clans, each with their own languages, beliefs, and jokes about the others. At first, your arrival caused concern. After all, a band of ex-pirates setting up camp rarely signals good things. But you didn't come with muskets blazing. You came with sunburns, fish breath, and the desperate look of men who'd rather barter for yams than raid for gold. And that's the difference. Over time, cautious curiosity softens into real engagement. You learn from them how to build better huts from ravinala leaves, how to fish using woven reed traps, how to make a healing salve from the bark of a tree that smells faintly like mint and mud. In return, they pick up some of your habits for better or worse. One local teenager becomes obsessed with your communal stew and insists on adding a splash of rum, no matter how many times it results in overly festive lunches. These cultural exchanges aren't always smooth. There are misunderstandings, linguistic, culinary, occasionally chicken-related, but they're learning moments, like when your idea of a shared goat pasture trampled over a sacred burial site. That one required a formal apology, 3 ceremonial dances, and the retirement of a goat named Basil. Still, the mutual respect grows. You begin to attend each other's festivals. You share tools, songs, and even jokes about sea snakes and in-laws. Children born in Libertalia learn both Malagasy and pirate slang, resulting in some truly bizarre lullabies. Historians still argue about how deeply pirate colonies in Madagascar integrated with local populations. Some believe it was minimal, limited to trade and a few strategic marriages. Others cite accounts suggesting much deeper cultural blending, including long-term settlements, intermarriage, and joint defense pacts. The truth, as always, is probably murky and deeply context-dependent. But in your village, the lines blur more each day. Local farmers help you learn irrigation. Pirate carpenters build fishing boats for village elders. A Malagasy healer sets up a thatch-roofed clinic in the middle of camp, offering remedies for both mosquito bites and bad dreams brought by parrots, which apparently is a diagnosable condition here. The two worlds, yours and theirs, begin to overlap like ripples in a bay, and out of that blend, something new takes shape. A hybrid culture, one that sings both sea shanties and ancestral chants. One that respects the wisdom of ancestors and the occasional absurdity of democracy by yelling about cassava prices at dawn. You've gone from stranger to neighbor, from foreigner to friend. And in the evenings, when the fires crackle and the air smells like grilled fish and rain, you look around and realize this isn't just a pirate experiment anymore. It's a living, breathing community, and you're part of it. By now, love is in the air. Or maybe that's just the scent of fermented pineapple and wood smoke. Either way, something is changing in Libertalia. The campfire glances are lingering longer. People are braiding each other's hair. Someone even carved a heart into a coconut. It was confusing but sweet. The truth is, all this peace and quiet has given everyone time to think about things other than surviving storms and counting cannonballs. Romance is blooming, and not in the usual swashbuckling kidnap-a-governor's-daughter sort of way. No, here in Libertalia, affection looks more like trading mango slices or building someone a hut with especially decorative thatching. You notice the shift when Pierre, once a fearsome gunner with arms like oak barrels, starts spending less time sharpening blades and more time weaving a bracelet out of palm fibers for a Sakalava woman named Lala. They met while arguing over cassava fermentation techniques and have been inseparable ever since. Their wedding, if you can call it that, is informal but joyful. A shared bowl of stew, a shouted agreement, and a dance that lasts until someone falls into the fire pit. No one's hurt, except maybe the stew. These intermarriages aren't just emotional. They're political, cultural, and quite frankly, practical. Love has a way of bypassing bureaucracy. Relationships form the threads that stitch communities together. Families blend, skills are shared. Traditions are exchanged and occasionally misremembered in hilarious ways. You attend a ceremony that's actually just two people swapping sandals under a banyan tree, and somehow it feels more sacred than any priest's sermon. And of course, not all unions are smooth. There are arguments, miscommunications, and one particularly dramatic breakup involving a stolen chicken and a badly played flute. But even these moments serve to deepen the bonds of your unlikely republic. Heartbreak, like farming and fishing, becomes something endured together. The local markets begin to reflect this cultural fusion. Spices from inland mix with salted fish from the pirate catch. Woven baskets contain not just yams, but also love notes written in a blend of Malagasy and creative English. One reads simply, "You smell better than roasted breadfruit." Romance, it seems, has found its poetry. Historians still debate the nature of these relationships in pirate settlements. Some argue they were exploitative, shaped by unequal power dynamics. Others, citing oral histories and genealogical records, suggest deep familial ties and mutual respect. The truth again lies in the messy middle. But in Libertalia, from what you've seen firsthand, these connections are often forged on shared labor, laughter, And, let's be honest, an affection for fermented coconut milk. As more couples form, the very structure of the settlement begins to shift. Huts expand. Communal spaces flourish. Children start to appear, tiny, wobbly, sticky-handed emissaries of the new generation. One tries to bite your toe during a town meeting. It's considered a compliment. There's a newfound softness to daily life. People sing more, meals are longer. Someone even starts teaching a courting dance that involves mimicking local birds and making clicking noises. You try it once and sprain your dignity, but the crowd applauds anyway. And yet, even in this sweetness, the pirate spirit hasn't vanished. It's just changed outfits. Instead of hoarding gold, people hoard stories. Instead of raiding ports, they raid mango trees. The wild energy that once fueled destruction now fuels creativity, community, and occasionally deeply embarrassing love poems carved into palm bark. One night, beneath a sky swirled with stars, you sit beside your own special someone. Maybe a fellow castaway. Maybe a local you once tried to impress with a badly built canoe. You don't say much. You don't need to. The quiet says it all. You're no longer drifting. You're anchored. Not by chains or rules, but by laughter, by warmth, and by the strange miracle of finding home in the very last place you expected. You hear it before you see it. The low murmur of voices, the occasional laugh, the sharp crack of someone dropping a coconut too confidently. It's another meeting under the breadfruit tree, and while it may sound official, it's anything but. There are no robes or gavels, no raised platforms or long-winded speeches, just a wide patch of packed earth beneath a broad canopy of fruit-heavy branches, and a whole lot of opinionated pirates and locals sitting cross-legged, arguing, sleepily, about the price of dried bananas. Today's topic: whether to allow one of the kids to start his own mango cart business. He's 10, has a goat for transport, and insists on calling himself the chief fruit executive. Some folks think it's adorable. Others are concerned about monopolies, even though no one knows what that actually means. You vote yes, mostly because he offered free samples. These meetings happen nearly every other day now, more if the weather's good and someone brings cassava chips. And while they sometimes spiral into tangents about whether parrots should be allowed in decision-making roles, a running joke that has somehow turned semi-serious, they're remarkably effective at keeping the community glued together. There are few rules to these assemblies. Anyone can speak. Anyone can object. The only true law is that everyone gets a turn, even if that turn involves a rambling 20-minute complaint about someone else's goat grazing too close to your sandals. The crowd listens patiently, then votes. Majority wins, though occasionally someone challenges the result with an impromptu limerick, which earns them a polite chuckle and an eye roll before the original decision is upheld. If it all sounds a little silly, that's because it is. But it's also democracy, messy, loud, deliciously inefficient democracy. It works not because it's perfect, but because everyone wants it to. And this style of governance isn't entirely made up. Historical pirate ships often use similar systems, with councils, votes, and shared codes of conduct. Captains were elected and could be removed at any time. Loot was distributed by formula. Decisions were discussed, not imposed. It wasn't just rebellion, it was structure born out of necessity. Historians still debate whether Libertalia itself, as described in 18th century writings, really functioned this way. Some argue it was just a fictional projection of Enlightenment ideals onto pirate mythology. Others insist that at least some of these practices reflected real experiments in governance by outcasts and wanderers craving fairness. Here, in your corner of the island, it's very real. You've watched petty arguments turn into policies. You've helped create the goat-watching rotation calendar. You once witnessed a tie-breaking vote settled by a mango-throwing contest. It was close, and somehow, despite, or maybe because of its chaos, the council has started to feel sacred. a place where people from different worlds come together to hash things out, to laugh, to grumble, and to try again. It's not about winning or power. It's about showing up, bringing your spoon, and being part of the ongoing soup of community life. Today, someone brings a new proposal, designating one day a week as silent hammock time, during which no one is allowed to speak loudly, argue, or play the pan flute within earshot of the nap zone. The vote passes 26-4. The parrot abstains. By sunset, the meeting winds down. Folks disperse, returning to their daily chores, their partners, their half-finished projects involving palm frond sculptures or fermented yams. You stay a moment longer under the tree, watching the last golden rays filter through the leaves. This isn't what you pictured when you signed up to sail the seas. But it might be better. You aren't just a castaway anymore. You're a citizen. There's a saying here now. You can vote a man out, but you can't unburn his stew. It refers, of course, to the infamous culinary downfall of Big Will. Big Will wasn't always a bad cook. In fact, early in the settlement's days, he was known for his coconut rice and his ability to wrangle a breadfruit into something almost appetizing. He was gruff but dependable, and when the idea of rotating responsibilities took off, he was one of the first to volunteer for leadership of the food stores. He ran the communal kitchen like a ship galley, organized, loud, and with a strictly enforced no singing while stirring policy. But over time, something shifted. The meals got saltier, the portions got smaller, and one day he served a stew that was basically just boiled banana peels in seawater. Rustic, he called it. Revolting, muttered everyone else. And thus began the first official vote of no confidence in Libertalia's short but eventful history. It wasn't angry, just disappointed. During the next meeting, under the breadfruit tree, someone brought up the stew. Someone else brought up the fact that Big Will had recently declared himself head of all culinary affairs, a title no one remembered voting on. The debate lasted until someone passed around mango wine, at which point the decision was unanimous. Big Will would step down from the food role. To his credit, he didn't argue. He saluted the council with a ladle, burned one last pot of beans, and took up goat herding. He's much better at that. This kind of leadership turnover happens a lot here, not because people are power-hungry, but because power itself is temporary, shared, and always subject to revision. Everyone gets a turn, and no one stays in charge for long. There's a constant cycle of give and take, rise and retire, joke and apology. Historians still argue whether pirate captains were truly disposable in this way. Some ships certainly held regular votes, but others fell into the same old traps of ego and hierarchy. What makes Libertalia different, perhaps, is its utter commitment to transience. If someone starts taking themselves too seriously, they're usually voted out or, at minimum, made to wear the leadership coconut, a large hollowed shell with a frown carved into it, worn as a badge of temporary shame. You've worn it once, yourself. You got a little too enthusiastic about enforcing nap schedules. The shame was real, but so were the naps. Worth it. There's something freeing about knowing that no one can clutch power too tightly here. There's no crown, no gold-trimmed robe, no big chair, just tasks, shared and shuffled. Even the community goat rotation list includes reminders that being goat marshal is not a lifetime appointment. One day, an elder from a nearby village visits and asks gently, "Who is your leader?" Everyone points in a different direction. He chuckles and says, "Ah, so everyone is leader and no one is leader." "Exactly," you reply, tossing him a roasted yam. It works, mostly. Not perfectly. Sometimes things fall through the cracks. A mismanaged cassava harvest. A confused vote that accidentally bans mangoes for a week. A bad decision about hut paint that leaves the village smelling like fermented turnips. But every mistake is a lesson. And every mistake is fixable. Together. As for Big Will, he's much happier now. The goats like him. He sings to them, something he never allowed in the kitchen. He's even started brewing a coconut-based cheese. It's ambitious. You pass him one evening while walking back from the river, and he offers you a wedge. Tastes like democracy, he says proudly. It tastes like salty regret. But you smile and nod anyway. Because in Libertalia, every voice matters. Even the ones who should never touch the stew pot again. From the start, you knew it couldn't last unnoticed. Peaceful pirate democracies, even the ones with goat councils and mango taxes, tend to make waves, especially when those waves brush up against imperial shipping routes. And one day, the Watchtower Parrot, whose official title is Honorary Sky Lookout, starts squawking wildly. You squint out to sea and see it, a silhouette with far too many sails. The East India Company has arrived. Not in full force, just a scout vessel at first, one of those long, sharp-nosed ships with polished wood and stiff uniforms that smell like ink and entitlement. It anchors off the coast, well beyond range of your driftwood catapults, which were never much more than decorative to begin with. The visitors don't storm the beach. They row in politely, disembark stiffly, and announce themselves with clipped accents and a flag no one here recognizes. They've heard rumors, they say, of a rogue colony of pirates playing politics and peace on imperial soil, of a settlement trading freely, ignoring taxes, and worst of all, choosing its own leaders without royal blessing. They ask to meet whoever is in charge. Cue laughter. After a long pause and a short explanation of the rotating leadership coconut system, they seem confused and mildly alarmed. They're not hostile, not yet. But they're not thrilled either. They walk the village, scribble in notebooks, ask pointed questions about who owns the land, who collects the taxes, who's responsible for the children running barefoot with chicken feathers in their hair. The answers don't help. You do your best to play diplomat. You offer tea. You smile a lot. You show them the school hut and the community gardens and the goat-sharing agreement written on driftwood. They nod. They frown. They write more notes. One of them sneezes when a lemur climbs on his hat. By the time they leave, the village is uneasy. Their polite exit doesn't fool anyone. You know what comes next. Historians still argue how much the colonial powers knew or cared about pirate enclaves in Madagascar. Some records suggest they tried to root them out, seeing them as threats to trade and sovereignty. Others believe they underestimated them, dismissing these settlements as footnotes, unworthy of gunpowder. But what's certain is this: when empire stares down freedom, something always gives. Back in Libertalia, the council convenes. People are tense. Some want to hide. Others want to fight. One person suggests disguising the entire village as a fishing camp and only speaking in riddles until the ships get bored and leave. In the end, the community decides to build, of all things, a fort. Not a real one, mind you. There's very little stone here, and even less experience in proper fortifications, but the gesture matters. A circular barricade of driftwood, bamboo, and palm logs goes up near the shoreline. There are towers made of old barrels, a watch platform perched in a tree, a very convincing scarecrow dressed like a sentry. From a distance, it might almost pass for defensible. Inside the village, you prepare too. Extra water is stored. Food is rationed. The goat brigade is relocated to the hills. And every person, from children to elders, is quietly given the same message. If worse comes to worst, scatter and survive. But despite the tension, life continues. The stew still simmers. The mango cart kid still makes his rounds. Someone paints a mural on the fort wall, a smiling sun and the words, "We're still here," because that's the heart of it, really. You didn't build Libertalia to fight. You built it to live, and you plan to keep doing exactly that, even if the uniforms come back. Even if they don't like your coconut council. Even if one day this all fades into rumor. For now, you are free. And sometimes, freedom just looks like a wobbly fence, a steaming bowl of yam stew, and a watch parrot squawking, "No kings," into the sea breeze. So there you are, standing proudly behind Libertalia's finest military achievement, a pointy stick wedged between two sandbags, guarded by a sleepy parrot and someone's extremely unimpressed cat. The fort, if you squint and use your imagination, almost looks like something that could slow down an enemy, maybe. The truth is, nobody here really knows how to build proper defenses. You've got a few former cannoneers and a carpenter with strong opinions about barrel architecture, but mostly your fort is more symbol than stronghold. And weirdly enough, that's kind of the point. The walls are made from bamboo, driftwood, and the occasional coral slab. There's a lookout platform made from two old masts lashed together, and one of the kids suggested installing a bell made from a hollowed-out gourd. It works, barely. Mostly it makes a sad thunk, but spirits are high. People joke about naming the fort the Splinter on account of how many toes it's claimed during construction. You're assigned to guard duty one afternoon and spend 3 hours watching crabs duel in the sand. A neighbor joins you with a spyglass fashioned from a rum bottle and a bit of waxed linen. You both pretend to see enemy sails on the horizon just to feel dramatic. Then you go back to eating roasted cassava and complaining about the humidity. But the real defense of Libertalia isn't its wall. It's the people. The spirit. The absolute refusal to return to the old world's rules. Everyone here knows how fragile this little experiment is and how precious. So they stand together. Not with swords drawn, but with shared stew bowls, communal hammocks, and an unspoken agreement. No tyrants, no thrones, no taking orders from someone just because they wear a fancier hat. That doesn't mean things are perfect. Tensions simmer. A few folks grumble that the no official leader policy makes responding to outside threats a bit messy. Someone suggests electing a temporary defense coordinator. This turns into a 4-hour debate about whether the coordinator can wear a feathered cape or if that's too monarchy adjacent. In the end, the community agrees to a 3-day rotating role called shield bearer. No cape, but they get to ring the gourd bell. Historians still argue about how prepared pirate communities were for serious defense. Some, like the notorious hideouts at Nassau or Port Royal, had actual fortifications. Others relied on speed, secrecy, or simply not being worth the trouble. Libertalia, if it existed, likely had only rudimentary defenses, built more for symbolic unity than real resistance. And there's real debate among scholars. Was the point of Libertalia to defend itself militarily, or to present a new kind of society so compelling that people would rather join it than attack it? Some believe that Libertalia, like the mythical Shangri-La, was never meant to withstand a siege. It was meant to inspire. Still, it's hard not to feel nervous when someone spots a sail far out at sea. The village holds its breath. Is it a merchant? A navy vessel, a passing trader, turned out to be a lost fishing boat with a broken rudder. They're invited in for dinner. 2 of their crew end up staying for good. That's how it goes. The outside world looms, yes, but it doesn't define you. What defines Libertalia is what's inside the walls, however wobbly those walls may be. A former deckhand now runs a night school where you can learn numbers and how to imitate lemur calls. A one-eyed carpenter starts carving totem poles with everyone's faces on them. Someone invents a new kind of breadfruit pie that's surprisingly good if you ignore the texture. And through it all, the fort stands, not as a fortress, but as a promise. A promise that here, on this sweltering, humming, gloriously weird patch of earth, people can live by consent, not command. That trust can be stronger than cannons. That driftwood and dreams can build something better than fear ever could. As you head back to your hammock that night, the gourd bell lets out its usual dull thunk. You smile. No kings, no crowns, just walls of hope. You don't want to overstate things, but you're pretty sure the community healer just smeared chicken fat on your forehead and called it tropical wisdom. That's what passes for medicine around here sometimes, and honestly, it works better than you'd expect. After all, you're in Madagascar, where the local flora includes plants that can cure fevers, soothe wounds, and, according to one slightly dramatic herbalist, ward off nightmares if applied at the correct lunar angle. You've stopped asking too many questions. Sickness doesn't strike often, but when it does, everyone pitches in. You come down with a nasty fever one week, the kind that turns your dreams into ocean-sloshed nonsense and makes your sweat smell like overripe pineapple. You're too tired to move, too hot to sleep. The usual remedies, cold river water, mashed yam paste, dramatic sighing, don't cut it. Enter Tiana, the local healer. She arrives with a basket full of potions, herbs, and curiously a rooster under one arm. You've learned not to argue. She rubs your chest with a mix of clove oil and crushed green leaves, tucks hot stones near your feet, then circles your hammock, muttering things about clearing the wind. The rooster just watches, judging. And somehow, you get better. Whether it was the herbs, the rest, or the rooster's disapproval, you'll never know. But your fever breaks, and you wake up feeling like a slightly overboiled yam, which is an improvement. These remedies come from a mix of Malagasy tradition and pirate improvisation. The locals bring centuries of knowledge, plant-based treatments, spiritual practices, and careful observation. The pirates, they bring rum, vague memories of ship surgeon lectures, and a disturbing habit of using gunpowder as disinfectant. The result is a strange but effective medical system. Cuts are treated with crushed tamarind bark and banana leaf wraps. Fevers get cooled with papaya seed paste. Toothaches? A fermented coconut slurry that numbs your mouth and your regrets. One man even insists he cured his scurvy with a steady diet of pineapple wine and sheer stubbornness. Historians still argue about the nature of medical care in pirate enclaves. Some accounts suggest pirates were deeply superstitious, relying on charms and rituals more than reason. Others point to documented uses of surgical tools, rudimentary hospitals, and surprisingly advanced wound care practices. The truth, like your rooster-based recovery, is likely both scientific and a little bit ridiculous. In Libertalia, medicine is a community affair. If someone's ill, neighbors show up with hot soup, lemur fur blankets, ethically shared of course, and unsolicited advice. The council even set up a rotating wellness watch, where volunteers check in on the elderly, the lonely, and anyone who looks a little too pale at breakfast. And wellness isn't just about medicine. It's about sleep, stretching, stories, laughter. You've attended impromptu group naps, guided deep breathing with coconuts, and one very soothing communal humathon. Someone even suggested creating a spa using hot rocks and seaweed wraps, but that devolved into a mud fight, so maybe not yet. Still, the idea matters. This is a place that believes in taking care of each other, not because of rules or rank, but because you're all in it together. You even start picking up bits of knowledge yourself. You learn how to crush baobab seeds into paste, how to tell when a cut needs more than just spit and hope, and how to politely decline the rooster-based therapy if you're feeling mostly fine. And one day, when someone else falls ill with the same fever you had, you find yourself at their side. Crushed leaves in hand. Tiana nodding approvingly. "You learned," she says. You smile, and in that moment, you realize something. You came here to escape, to hide, to survive, but now you're part of the cure. Trade starts the way most things do in Libertalia, with a goat, a joke, and a bit of curiosity. It begins when a longboat appears on the horizon. You and a few others squint at it nervously from the lookout platform, which is mostly just a plank nailed to a tree with a good view and questionable structural integrity. But this boat isn't flying any imperial flags. It's not bristling with muskets or bowing to a king's crest. No, it's got laundry flapping from the rigging, two guys arguing loudly in Portuguese, and a parrot perched on the prow like it owns the place. When they dock, they come bearing gifts, or at least opportunities. Spices, dried fish, strange fabrics that shimmer in the light. They're passing traders from Mozambique, and they've heard whispers of your odd little settlement. They're curious. Cautious but friendly, you offer them a roasted yam. They offer you something they call spiced saltfish delight, which tastes mostly like disappointment and peppers, but it breaks the ice. Soon, more visitors begin to arrive. A dhow from Zanzibar with hand-carved beads and potent clove oil. A canoe from a nearby island loaded with cassava flour and a stunningly chatty fisherman. Even a rogue Dutch merchant ship, clearly off its proper route, turns up with rum, boots, and a complete disregard for their own navigation charts. At first, the trades are simple. Yams for fabric, bananas for metal tools. But quickly, a market culture begins to form. Someone builds a table, someone else lays out shells as a form of currency. A third person starts collecting IOUs written on palm bark because nothing says pirate credit like an agreement scrawled in mango juice. The most surprising part, you're good at it. The whole community is. Turns out democracy and bartering go hand in hand. Decisions about trade policies are made at the Breadfruit Council. One week you set the exchange rate for cassava. The next, you regulate how many coconuts equal a bottle of rum. Spoiler, it's more than you think. Rum becomes rare quickly. You even elect a trade liaison, though they're only allowed to serve one moon cycle before someone else takes over. That's how Miri, a quick-witted former stowaway with a laugh like thunder, ends up negotiating a three-way spice deal between your village, a coastal fishing tribe, and a surprisingly entrepreneurial group of teenagers running a mango jam cartel. Historians still debate the extent of pirate trading in Madagascar. Some evidence suggests that rather than plundering endlessly, many pirates preferred to engage in exchange, selling off captured goods, buying food and materials, and forming cooperative links with local communities. They weren't just fighters, they were businessmen, albeit ones with poor impulse control and a fondness for hats. And here in Libertalia, the same holds true. Trade isn't just economic, it's diplomatic. It builds bridges, it builds stories. One visitor offers you an old spyglass in return for a story about the great mango fiasco of last year. You tell it with dramatic flair, exaggerating the part about the goat uprising. He laughs so hard he gives you a second spyglass for free. Of course, trade brings challenges. Greed creeps in. People start hoarding salt. Someone tries to pass off fake pearls made of snail shells. The community responds with a stern council vote, a strongly worded song, and a temporary market ban on the offender, who is eventually forgiven after composing an apology poem that begins with, "O salty shell, thou art not pearl." But mostly, trade strengthens your strange little republic. Visitors come, goods flow, and Libertalia becomes more than a hidden village. It becomes a hub, an idea, a place where trust is currency, where stories are exchanged as freely as fish, where nobody blinks when someone says, "I'll trade you 3 coconuts, half a hammock, and this slightly haunted spoon for your goat." And if that isn't freedom, what is? You wake to find someone hammering driftwood signs along the footpath, each one bearing an elaborate sketch of nothing. At least it looks like nothing, just swirling lines and squiggles. But when you ask, the artist grins and says, "It's our constitution." You tilt your head. That bit means, "Don't steal hammocks," they add, proudly pointing at what might be a stylized monkey. This is what passes for record-keeping in Libertalia. You have no printing press. No parchment worth preserving. Your ink is mashed berries and squid ink mixed with hopeful optimism. Most rules and decisions are remembered collectively, passed around like stories or sung as work songs while peeling cassava. One particularly passionate resident insists on carving key decisions into driftwood planks and nailing them to trees. The hammock resolution of 1704, the cassava trade agreement, and the entire minutes of the infamous two-goat disagreement now hang outside the breadfruit council site, weather-worn and entirely out of chronological order. It's charming. And chaotic and fragile, and that's the problem. Visitors, traders, and even newer settlers start asking questions. Where are your written laws, your maps? Your boundaries, your treaties? You shrug, pointing to the old man who remembers everything, unless it rained that day, the child who can sing the village history backwards, and the parrot that squawks, "No taxation without sweet potatoes." But the outside world doesn't accept oral tradition. Not when ships fly imperial flags, not when scouts arrive with scrolls, stamps, and very serious hats. You try to write things down. You really do. A few of you start keeping scrolls of bark and stitched leaf journals. You form a committee, briefly, to record Libertalia's founding principles. But every time you sit down, someone interrupts with stew or a mango joke, and by the time you return, the ink's been smeared by lemur paws or eaten by goats, and yet somehow the system holds. Because what you lack in written laws, you make up for in lived ones. People remember, people tell. Children grow up knowing that on market days, elders get served first. That goats can't be bartered without a witness. That hammock theft results in public mockery and a pie to the face. It's not just law, it's culture. Historians still argue whether Libertalia existed at all, let alone functioned without documents. Critics say the whole thing was a fable, invented by 18th century writers, romanticizing pirates. Defenders argue that oral traditions, like those of many Malagasy communities, were valid and sophisticated, and that just because there's no parchment doesn't mean it wasn't real. You tend to side with the defenders. After all, you've seen it yourself. The stories, the customs, the small truths that bind people far more tightly than ink ever could. Still, you wonder what will happen when you're gone. When no one remembers the great hammock debate, or the mango tax vote of the dry season. What survives when the leaves decay and the driftwood signs fall? You bring this up at a council meeting. The discussion is long and meandering as usual. Someone suggests carving laws into stone. Someone else suggests just being really, really good at remembering things. In the end, you all agree on two things. The children will learn the stories. The parrot will be given a more robust legal education. A week later, someone paints a giant mural near the village center. It's not official, but it tells your tale through pictures, symbols, and, in one corner, a very detailed goat. It may not be written in the ink of kings, but it's yours. You don't expect to be shouted down by a parrot during a council vote, but here we are. To be fair, the parrot, named Justice, isn't actually voting, but it has, over the months, picked up key phrases like "point of order" and "I object," and likes to yell them at particularly tense moments. It's both annoying and weirdly appropriate. This meeting is lively. The subject, whether to allow music during evening stew time. Some argue it encourages community bonding. Others say it's distracting, especially when the homemade instruments include conch horns and a guy who insists on using his armpit for percussion. You sit near the back, sipping tamarind tea, marveling at the whole spectacle. Around you are ex-pirates, former sailors, Malagasy farmers, curious traders, and at least one sleepwalking goat. And they're all yelling, gently, humorously, passionately, about soup acoustics. Welcome to Libertalia's version of public discourse. And you love it, because this isn't just argument for the sake of it. It's democracy in motion. People care. People show up. They talk. They vote. They change their minds. They shout point of order, even when they're not entirely sure what it means. You remember when you first arrived, still blinking seawater from your eyes, unable to imagine a society without a captain barking orders. Now, you're watching a barefoot man wearing a hat made of banana leaves deliver a stirring defense of flute neutrality in community spaces. Libertalia has come into its own. There's even a process now. Items go on a chalkboard or leaf board, depending on the weather. People sign up to speak, and a talking stick, literally a stick with feathers, is passed around to manage turns. If someone hogs it, the parrot objects. Loudly. Of course, not everything is serious. Some proposals are just for laughs, like last week's motion to replace the council table with a trampoline. It passed briefly, before being overturned when someone bounced into a yam cart. But the important issues do get attention. Trade policies, fishing rights, shared water access, defense plans, yes, still, and the education of the village's growing pack of noisy children, one of whom recently declared himself Vice Admiral of Naps. There's even a proposal to write a community song. It goes poorly. The first draft rhymes liberty with fish debris. The second is mostly whistling. The third gets co-opted by a toddler who insists it be about ducks. You shelve it for now. Historians still argue whether pirate societies truly practiced egalitarian governance on land. Many accept that shipboard democracy existed, but land-based systems like Libertalia are harder to prove. Still, journals, travelers' tales, and even Malagasy oral traditions suggest that some form of consensus building happened in these strange coastal enclaves, and consensus is what drives Libertalia. Not perfection, not speed, but a genuine effort to include everyone, even the quiet ones, the newcomers, the kids, and yes, the parrot. You think of that sometimes when you look around. No single leader, no carved laws, no throne. Just this, people in hammocks, people under trees, people arguing about stew. One evening, a trader from the mainland visits and sits through a council meeting. He laughs afterward, asking, "How does anything get done here?" You think for a moment and reply, "Slowly." But it lasts. And it does. Even when people disagree, there's trust. Even when a decision flops, like the great yam rationing misfire of last season, there's room to try again. Because in Libertalia, no one's above the stew. Everyone eats from the same pot, and when the pot runs low, someone stands, clears their throat, and says, "Maybe tomorrow, fewer yams and more mangoes," and everyone nods. Because it makes sense. Because that's how it's done. Because against all odds, this ridiculous, brilliant, ramshackle pirate democracy works. You're sipping something vaguely tea-like, infused with clove, ginger, and a mystery root that might be mildly hallucinogenic, when a commotion erupts near the goat pens. A man is shouting about injustice. A woman is shouting back. And the goat? The goat looks smug. Turns out someone's prized chicken has gone missing, and all signs point to a neighbor who just happens to be making experimental chicken stew today. There are no feathers, no witnesses, just a stew pot and a suspicious lack of alibi. So, naturally, it's time for court. Libertalia doesn't have judges, really. Just a rotating team of mediators, chosen by vote, bribery by banana, or sheer enthusiasm. Today's judge is old Ephraim, a retired bosun with a voice like gravel and a deep affection for due process and dramatic pauses. He wears a ceremonial hat that is, without explanation, shaped like a pineapple. Everyone gathers near the breadfruit tree. The accused stands on one side, the accuser on the other, both under strict orders not to interrupt or throw fruit. There's no jail here, no handcuffs, just the weight of communal judgment, and the possibility of being assigned latrine duty until your fingers prune. The trial begins with a parrot squawk, Libertalia's equivalent of all rise. The plaintiff describes the chicken, speckled, sassy, answers to Henrietta. She claims she saw Henrietta near the accused's hut just yesterday. The accused counters. Yes, he saw the chicken, but it wandered off. The stew is made from entirely different poultry. Someone asks, "How many poultry options do you have?" He declines to answer. Witnesses are called. One says she heard clucking. Another says the stew smells suspiciously Henrietta-like. A third simply testifies, "I liked Henrietta. She had spunk." Eventually, Ephraim bangs the ceremonial spoon on a coconut to signal closing arguments. After a brief deliberation, the jury, made up of 5 elders and 1 goat, symbolically of course, finds the accused guilty of poor communication and stew-related opacity. His sentence? 3 days of cooking duty, with recipe supervision, a heartfelt apology to the plaintiff, and the construction of a new chicken coop for the village. Everyone seems satisfied. Even the parrot nods in approval. This isn't an isolated event. Disputes over hammocks, goats, water buckets, mango territories are settled this way, not with fists or fear, but with stories, laughter, and the weight of shared responsibility. It's a justice system built not on law books but on lived values, fairness, honesty, restitution, and a good sense of humor. And while it may seem quaint, historians note that pirate codes often included specific rules about conflict resolution. Captains could be removed by vote. Loot disputes were settled by arbitration. Even theft among crewmates had prescribed consequences. In Libertalia, that sense of order has simply moved ashore and softened with time. Still, it's not perfect. There are gray areas. One time, a goat bit someone's hammock in half, and no one could agree on whether the goat or its owner should be held responsible. The resulting debate became so heated that a new rule was written. All goats act as individuals under community law. It didn't help much, but it's now recited during court ceremonies for comic effect. And even though the stakes are rarely high, stew, space, goats, the process matters. It teaches accountability. It gives people a voice. And it reinforces what Libertalia is really about: mutual respect and a belief that problems are best solved with input from everyone affected, including the goats. You sit quietly after the trial, watching the village slowly disperse into its usual rhythm. The plaintiff is now helping the accused peel yams for dinner. The parrot is loudly proclaiming, "Justice is delicious," and trying to steal mangoes. A group of kids are reenacting the trial with puppets made of palm fronds. You smile, because this, ridiculous and beautiful and deeply humane, is justice. It may not impress a magistrate in London, but here it works. The sun hangs low, casting golden light across the village square, where today's council is anything but routine. This time, it's not about stew or goats or hammocks. It's about women, or more specifically, the women who have shaped Libertalia since its earliest days and continue to quietly, cleverly hold it together. It's easy to forget, amid all the mango feasts and parrot heckling, that Libertalia was never just a boys' club. From the beginning, local Malagasy women welcomed, tolerated, or cautiously allied with the seafaring strangers who washed up on their shores. Some were healers. Others were farmers, traders, craftswomen, mothers, elders. And many, in time, became the backbone of your community. One of the first settlers to marry a local woman was Joss, a former sailor with crooked teeth and a soft heart. He met Ravo during a cassava picking accident. She laughed when he tripped into a basket of yams, and he claimed love ever since. Ravo went on to manage nearly all the village's trading routes. She spoke 4 dialects, knew every boat captain within 200 miles, and could balance 5 baskets of dried fish on her head while negotiating interest rates. She also started the no yelling at meetings after sunset rule, which everyone agrees improved both the democracy and the sleep. As more families formed, women became not just participants, but leaders. Tiva, whose pineapple moonshine kept half the council meetings well lubricated, organized the shared labor system. Mina began teaching letters to the kids, and to pirates who finally admitted they couldn't read. Fatima, a visiting weaver from the coast, introduced community textiles and immediately ran for council facilitator. She won, of course. Twice. And not all of the women are from outside. Malagasy matriarchs, many with lineages stretching back generations, act as wisdom keepers. They're not loud, but when they speak, people listen, and not just because they can silence a room with a single eyebrow raise. Your democracy, while chaotic and coconut-fueled, owes much of its structure to their steady hands. They remind you that fairness isn't just about voting, it's about listening. It's about care work, cultural knowledge, and the quiet labor that keeps everyone fed, healed, and hopeful. Historians still argue how involved women were in pirate societies. Most classic pirate tales erase them or reduce them to tavern tropes. But real history paints a richer picture. There were women on ships, in coastal settlements, and often at the heart of informal governance, especially in places like Madagascar, where gender roles weren't shaped by the same rigid European codes. Women held far more authority than outsiders expected. In Libertalia, it's not unusual for the head of the goat census to be a grandmother, for conflict mediation to be led by a pair of sisters who finish each other's sentences, or for disciplinary actions to be handed out by a 5-foot healer with no weapons but a deeply withering tone. The Breadfruit Council now ensures balanced representation, not because of a rule, but because it makes sense. Because everyone knows Tiva will catch a lie faster than any man. Because Mina actually reads the records. Because Ravo still walks faster than pirates half her age and never forgets a vote. One young girl, Noro, has started recording oral histories. With a carved stick and dyed cloth, she embroiders key moments of village life into tapestries. The chicken trial, the fort's first rainstorm, the council's decision to formally declare Tuesdays no argument day, which didn't last. She's 12, and already a legend. Tonight, as the fire crackles and stories are shared, someone asks you who's in charge of Libertalia. You glance around. The council under the tree, the women weaving baskets as they chat about market prices, the kids practicing vote counting with pebbles, and Ravo quietly organizing the next shipment of ginger root behind the scenes. You grin and say, "Depends who you ask." But if you're smart, you ask the women first. It starts with smoke, just a thin line on the far side of the bay, harmless looking, like someone's burning a cooking fire too enthusiastically. But it doesn't belong to anyone you know. And soon, the boats follow. 2 small vessels, nothing fancy, canoes lashed together, patched sails, hulls that have seen far better years. Still, they move with purpose. Fast, confident, familiar, in a way that makes your gut twist. New pirates, not the retired, sunburned, garden hoe carrying kind. These are sharp-eyed, young, hungry. The kind who still call it booty and mean it. They disembark like they own the place, scanning the beach, scoffing at the driftwood fort, smirking at the mango stand. Their leader, a wiry man with a red scarf and a grin like a broken bottle, introduces himself as Captain Toma. He talks about the old ways, about strength, about taking. He says Libertalia looks cozy, easy, ripe. You all smile politely and offer stew. The thing is, Libertalia has no army, no police. You defend yourselves with words, with votes, with shared responsibility, and yes, with a few sharpened sticks if absolutely necessary. But you're not fools. You know how this could go, and yet you don't panic. Instead, you invite them to a council meeting, not a trap, a test. They come half mocking, half curious. You serve yam fritters. You pass around the talking stick. You let them speak, and then your people speak. Ravo talks about trade. Mina tells the story of the chicken trial. One elder explains the rules of mango taxation. Someone else describes goat court. And slowly, the tension shifts. Some of the newcomers laugh, genuinely. A few listen with furrowed brows. One even takes notes on a leaf, but Captain Toma, he doesn't laugh. He narrows his eyes. He smells weakness. That night, he wanders the village, poking at things, asking questions, whispering to some of the younger settlers, stirring doubts. It works. For a while, a few of your own start wondering if Libertalia has grown soft, if it's time to go back to plundering. If freedom means doing whatever you want, not building soup cooperatives and arguing about yam rotation. Historians still argue whether pirate communities ever faced these ideological fractures between the ones who wanted peace and the ones who still longed for conquest. Some accounts suggest that Libertalia, if it existed, ultimately crumbled because of them. Others say it held strong, precisely because it knew how to absorb challenge without turning to tyranny. You're about to find out which version is true. The council meets. Everyone's there. The whole village. Even Captain Toma, sitting with arms crossed and a face like a thundercloud. This time there's no stew, no mango wine. Just a question. What kind of freedom do we want? The debate is fierce. Voices rise. Tears are shed. The parrot screams no kings at inopportune moments, but eventually clarity emerges, not from a speech but from the silence that follows it. You all remember why you came here. Not to dominate, to live. Toma stands to speak. There's a long pause, then he snorts. Bunch of hammock-hugging romantics, he mutters. He walks out. Most of his crew stay. The next day, Toma's boats are gone. And Libertalia breathes again. There's no celebration, no victory dance. Just the slow, quiet rhythm of life returning. Goats to feed, yams to dig, hammocks to mend. Because the real revolution? It's not in the battles you win. It's in the peace you refuse to give up. They arrive just after the rains, when the island is thick with green and the air smells like wet bark and warm soil. Not pirates this time. Not traders. Not even castaways, the French. Not a war fleet, just a ship. Sleek, white-sailed, with a name you can't pronounce, and cannons that glint like warning bells. They don't anchor in the bay. They loom just offshore, sending a single rowboat toward the beach, bearing 4 well-dressed men and 1 translator who looks more apologetic than anyone should while wearing epaulets. This is not a raid. It's a message. They've heard of Libertalia. Not from rumors this time, from maps, from intercepted letters, from increasingly frustrated officials trying to make sense of how a pirate village survived this long without falling apart or turning on itself. They ask to speak to the governor, which is adorable considering your most recent official act was voting on whether stew day should rotate clockwise or counterclockwise. Eventually, they're brought before the Breadfruit Council. Ravo leads the meeting, with Mina at her side and a parrot overhead who squawks, "We don't do governors," at regular intervals. The French are polite, mostly. Diplomatic. They compliment the gardens, admire the goat census system. They even try the stew. But their message is clear. This land, they say, belongs to the French crown. You glance around, at the former pirates who built the huts, at the Malagasy women who planted the fields, at the children born beneath these trees, who have never seen a European harbor, who speak 3 languages, and know that democracy starts with taking turns during mango season. And you think, whose land again? The discussion is long, measured, everyone gets a turn. The translator sweats buckets. You explain that Libertalia governs itself, that there is no king here, that no one owns the land because everyone belongs to it, that your laws are woven into stories and stew pots, and no one's ever successfully taxed a goat here, not for lack of trying. Historians still debate what happened when colonial powers finally acknowledged pirate settlements in Madagascar. Some suggest they ignored them, deeming them too small or too eccentric to bother with. Others claim attempts were made to integrate or erase them. But Libertalia, legend or not, stands for something stubborn, something not easily folded into a flag. The French listen. They nod. They promise to report back. You offer them a parting gift: 3 mangoes, a small basket of woven beads, and a copy of your community's decisions, written on a series of palm leaves and accompanied by a rough drawing of a smiling goat. They leave at dawn. The village gathers that evening to debrief. The conversation is tense, but not afraid. The council votes to reinforce the lookout post, to double the stew reserves, to teach the children how to hide the important things like the trade ledgers, the seed stores, the dancing drums. But no one votes to run, because you've worked too hard for this. You didn't build Libertalia with muskets and money. You built it with trust, with mango crates and bedtime stories, with shared chores and rooster-related laws. And sure, maybe one day they'll return, with papers or soldiers, or ships bigger than your entire coastline. But you'll be here, with your council, with your stew, with your goat census, and your wildly inaccurate maps, and your absolute refusal to kneel. Because in Libertalia, freedom isn't just a flag. It's a choice you make every single day. The Breadfruit Council gathers early this morning, well before the parrots start their daily round of unsolicited political commentary. The sky is overcast, the kind of low-hanging grey that makes everything feel just a little more serious. You sit with your knees in the dew-damp grass, watching the council arrange themselves in a slightly crooked circle. This is it, the great meeting of 1705, the biggest one yet. Word has spread. Among the neighboring villages, among the newest settlers, even among a few of those formerly skeptical traders who now show up regularly with armfuls of dried fish and gently used cooking pots. Everyone knows the stakes. What will Libertalia do now? The French didn't attack, but they made their point. Others will follow. The world beyond your peaceful parrot-squawking island is large, hungry, and not particularly fond of places that run on kindness and communal yam rotation. The question is, do you resist? Do you hide? Or do you try something else entirely? The debate begins. One group argues for fortification, more walls, better lookouts, maybe even a real cannon. There's an old one half buried in the sand, but it currently houses a family of very territorial crabs. They'll come back, one elder says, holding his walking stick like a sword. And next time, it won't be to compliment the stew. Others argue for retreat. Not surrender, just relocation. Find a deeper part of the island, farther inland, harder to reach. Disappear like a shadow in the forest. We can plant elsewhere, says a soft-spoken farmer. No one owns the wind. A third group, led by Ravo, proposes something different. Openness. Not weakness, not surrender, but diplomacy. Build relationships with neighboring communities. Share stories. Make Libertalia something so valued, so embedded, that outsiders would think twice before trying to crush it. We make ourselves harder to erase, she says, by growing roots that stretch far beyond the bay. You listen, quietly amazed. This is democracy at its most intense, full of voices, of fears, of dreams. Everyone speaks. Everyone listens, even the parrot, who seems to favor the relocation plan based on its repeated cries of "run for the hills." Lunch is postponed. Emotions run high. Someone dramatically offers to duel anyone in favor of cannonballs. He's handed a mango and told to sit down. Eventually, the vote is taken. The choices are written on large palm leaves, one for each proposal. Everyone steps forward, placing a shell beside their choice, and the result, not a landslide, not unanimous, but clear. You'll stay. You'll reinforce what needs reinforcing. You'll begin sending small delegations to nearby Malagasy clans to forge stronger ties. You'll hold training sessions on what to do if outsiders arrive again, how to protect the young, where to store the food, when to hide and when to stand tall. You won't run, you won't fight, unless you absolutely have to. You'll live. Historians still puzzle over the fate of pirate settlements like Libertalia. Did they collapse under pressure? Vanish into myth? Evolve into something else entirely? Folded into local communities, absorbed by culture, swallowed by time and forest and legend? Here, though, you feel the path forming beneath your feet. It's not set in stone. It may change tomorrow, but it's yours. You walk back to your hut that evening, the grass cool between your toes, the scent of tamarind smoke in the air. The council's decision echoes in your mind, not with fanfare, but with quiet certainty. Not a declaration of war, not a retreat into shadow, but a vote whispered between yams and hope to stay together, to be here, to keep dreaming. Even when the clouds roll in, the mornings come quieter now. Maybe it's the season, cooler winds, gentler tides. Or maybe it's the natural settling of things, the way firelight softens after the wood burns down to embers. Libertalia is still here, still full of laughter and parrots and the occasional mango-based feud, but there's something different now, a slowing. The fort isn't manned anymore. Not regularly, anyway. Someone hung a hammock from the lookout platform last week, and now it's become a favored napping spot. The gourd bell clunks in the breeze, half out of tune. No one minds. The market still bustles, but with less urgency. Trades are slower, more social. People stop to chat. Kids help run stalls, offering slightly crooked math in exchange for seashells and compliments. The mango cart kid, now a teenager, has expanded into pineapples and renamed himself the Fruit King. No one's quite sure who gave him the title. Possibly the parrot. There's still a council, of course, but meetings are less frequent. The rules are stable. The systems running themselves. Rotations, cooperatives, goat registrations, even dispute resolution over hammock infringements. It turns out, once people feel heard, they don't need to argue quite so often. You begin to notice the small signs of change. Huts being repaired less, then not at all. A boat that once made weekly trips for trade now rests permanently at shore, its sail patched but unused. Ravo, once everywhere at once, spends more time in the garden, humming old songs and gently scolding the lemurs. Even the children seem more settled. They still play, still pretend to be council members and outlaw goats, but now they ask more questions about the outside world. They've heard stories. They want to know what lies beyond the hills, beyond the bay. A few of them leave now and then, grown, curious, bold. They're seen off with packed meals, hugs, and a quiet hope that they'll carry Libertalia's spirit with them, wherever they land. Historians still argue about the end of Libertalia. Some claim it was destroyed, wiped out by empire or internal strife. Others insist it was never more than a myth, a story told by sailors to make sense of their longing for freedom. But there's another theory, a quieter one, that it didn't fall. It simply faded. Because not all things end with cannon fire or conquest. Some things conclude like a song, not with a bang, but with the last soft note hanging in the air, gently disappearing into silence. You begin noticing more absence than arrival. Familiar faces drift away, some by boat, some into the forest, some into the warm earth beneath the breadfruit tree. The population thins, but the spirit remains. Even the parrot speaks less now. One day you take a long walk beyond the village, through the path lined with murals and driftwood signs. You find one of the oldest markers, cracked by sun and moss, its paint nearly gone. But the words are still there, faint but legible. Here we were free. You run your fingers over the grooves, remembering. Not just the mango debates or the stew arguments or even the chicken trial, but the feeling of being seen, of being part of something, of voting with your feet, your voice, your heart. You look back at the village, still there, still real. But somehow already part of memory. Libertalia doesn't need to be defended anymore because it's been lived. And that, more than walls or flags, is how things survive. You find yourself walking more slowly these days, not from age necessarily, though your knees do creak like a poorly tied sail, but from the weight of reflection. Everything feels heavier now, but not in a sorrowful way. Just full, as if the place around you is dense with stories, layered like sediment beneath your feet. You sit under the breadfruit tree. Yes, that breadfruit tree, where the council once gathered, so often you thought the roots might grow into the shape of a voting bench. Now it's mostly shade and memory. Occasionally someone comes by to nap or tie up a goat. You smile and wave. They wave back. No one speaks much. The truth is, Libertalia has quieted. It hasn't fallen apart and it hasn't vanished. It's just transitioned, matured. Like fruit left too long in the sun, richer, softer, and more likely to attract poetic metaphors. And in this quieter season, you begin to wonder what was real and what was legend. Captain Misson? Maybe. Caraccioli? Possibly. The infamous Mango Tax Rebellion of 1703? That one you definitely remember. Your hammock got confiscated in the aftermath. You think about the stories that shaped this place, how some visitors arrived already knowing your tale, asking where the Parliament of Pirates meets, or demanding to see the original hammock of freedom. You point them to a sagging canvas beneath the tamarind tree and offer them stew. Some leave disappointed, others leave inspired. Historians still argue, of course. They comb archives, chase ship manifests, and squint at faded maps. One scholar insists Libertalia was no more than an idealistic fever dream spun by seamen with too much rum. Another calls it the most important failed state that might not have existed. But they don't know what you know. They don't know about the stew recipes scratched into coconut shells, about the child who learned to count using goats, about the parrot who once broke up a fight by shouting, "Justice demands pudding." They don't know about the votes held under moonlight, the tears shed over broken fishing nets, the laughter that echoed off the jungle when someone proposed a law requiring all hats to have feathers. They don't know that freedom doesn't always announce itself with trumpets. Sometimes it arrives barefoot, with tangled hair, and just enough rope to hang a hammock. You once believed history lived in books, in royal decrees and bloody battles and old men with medals, but now you understand, history also lives in mango stains, in whispered jokes, in the way two people can argue over goats in 3 languages and still hug it out before supper. Libertalia might not appear on most maps, but it appeared in lives, yours and so many others, and that, you realize, is enough. It doesn't matter whether Misson's name ever rang across these beaches, or whether any scholar believes in the republic you helped build. What matters is that for a while, just long enough to count, you lived in a place where no one bowed, where everyone had a voice, where peace was not a prize, but a practice. You run your hand over the worn wood of an old council bench. A name is carved there, long faded, maybe yours, maybe someone else's. It doesn't matter. The story remains. You've noticed something strange happening in the evenings now. As the light fades and the fireflies blink their slow Morse code between the trees, the younger folks gather to tell stories, not of kings or empires or famous naval battles, but of this place, of Libertalia. But the stories aren't always accurate, not in the way a historian might demand. One girl swears the first council was held by a talking lemur. Another boy insists the breadfruit tree was planted by a wizard with a beard made of seaweed. You hear someone refer to the old stew pot as the cauldron of agreement. You smile. You don't correct them. Because now you understand. When a story enters memory, it begins to shift. And in those shifts, something else begins to take shape. Not history exactly, but myth. Not lies, but meanings. And the meaning of Libertalia, that's harder to pin down. Maybe it was a rebellion, a retreat, a sanctuary, a dream. A joke that got too serious, or a serious thing that wisely refused to take itself too seriously. You think back on it all, the mango debates, the goat courts, the hammocks with shared custody agreements, the stew feuds, the dancing, the votes, the absurdity of a society that chose kindness as its foundation, even if it meant a little chaos. Historians still argue whether any of this really happened. Some say there were pirates on Madagascar, yes, but nothing like this. Others argue the idea of Libertalia was more important than its details, an early spark of resistance to empire, hierarchy, and the boot heel of old world authority. And now you're part of that argument, whether you want to be or not. Your stories, your choices, your time beneath these trees, they'll ripple outward. They'll be retold, misremembered, painted in murals, sung in sea shanties, maybe even mangled in a lecture by some overconfident professor who's never tasted cassava stew in his life. That's what legends do. They shed details and gather meaning. Someone once asked if you were afraid Libertalia would disappear. But places like this don't disappear, not really, because Libertalia was never just a village. It was an idea. And ideas, especially the defiant, gently ridiculous ones, have a habit of surviving. They hide in corners. They ride the wind. They whisper to tired travelers and hopeful children. They survive in the way people look at each other when they agree, without speaking, to take turns stirring the stew. One day, perhaps long after you've returned to the soil or drifted elsewhere, someone will land on a different shore. They'll build a hut, plant yams, and ask their neighbors if they'd like to vote on who gets hammock privileges. And someone will say, that sounds a lot like Libertalia, and someone else will nod. And the story will begin again. You're the last one awake tonight. The fire has burned down to coals. A pot swings lazily over the embers, still warm from the evening meal. Around you, hammocks creak gently in the breeze, and the stars scatter themselves across the sky in that casual brilliance that makes you feel small but not lonely. You look out at Libertalia, not as a place now, but as a memory still breathing. You walk the quiet paths, past the old council tree, past the mural wall where someone's added a new image, two hands clasped between a goat and a breadfruit. Past the parrot's perch, now vacant, though you swear you heard it mutter fairness in its sleep just last week. You reach the shoreline. The tide is out, the moon is high, and the waves say what they always say, soft, endless, ancient. You think about those who left, those who stayed, those who never arrived, and you think about you. Because you didn't just witness this place, you helped build it. And now, as time wears gently through the village like water over stone, you feel the story softening, settling into its final chapter. Historians still argue over endings. Was Libertalia crushed, absorbed, forgotten? Did it thrive for decades in secret or vanish like smoke? There are no royal records, no carved monuments, no official maps. Just this, a breeze that carries laughter. A trail worn smooth by bare feet. A child's voice in the dark asking, "Can you tell the one about the stew vote again?" And your own quiet voice replying, "Of course, because Libertalia never needed to last forever. It just needed to happen, and it did." So tonight, as the coals dim and the village sleeps, you lie back, listening to the earth breathe, feeling the wind trace the old song of no kings, no masters, and you let go. Not in sadness, but in peace. You've done enough. Libertalia will dream on. You wake to the sound of rain, light, steady, the kind that soaks the edges of dreams. It taps on your roof, runs down the leaves outside, and drips from the corners of old wooden beams like a metronome for reflection. Today feels like a memory before it's even begun. The village is hushed. Most people stay in or gather in small groups beneath shared awnings, sipping tea brewed with cloves and singing old council songs. Someone's trying to fix a leak in the library hut. Yes, Libertalia has a library now, if you can count a shelf of bark-leaf scrolls and a basket labeled goat-approved reading. And yet, something stirs. It's not dramatic, not a storm, not an invasion, not the discovery of buried treasure. It's subtler than that. Like the softest tide turning, the kind of shift you only notice because you've been here long enough to feel it in your bones. People are preparing. Not for battle, for departure. One family packs their tools in silence. Another counts bundles of dried food. A young couple stands by the boats, their child perched on a crate, already telling stories of places they haven't seen yet. There are no speeches, no declarations, just the quiet understanding that after all this time, some are ready to carry the spirit of Libertalia into the wider world. You help them pack, offer advice on currents, tie bundles tight with vines. The parrot, now older and slower, perches on your shoulder as you say goodbye. Not everyone is leaving. Some will stay. The elders, the gardeners, the goat-obsessed. Libertalia won't vanish. It will thin, transform. Maybe become a place of stories more than citizens. Historians still argue about this phase of pirate settlements, whether they truly dissolved or just diffused, their ideals spreading like ink in water. Did they seed change across the Indian Ocean? Did their strange, stubborn ideas ripple into other revolutions? You like to think so, because those who leave aren't abandoning Libertalia. They're extending it. They carry its lessons in their laughter, its customs in their kindness, in every marketplace where trade is fair, in every decision made by group vote instead of coercion, in every child taught to question power gently and plant yams carefully. Libertalia lives on. And as the boats slide into the sea and the mist blurs their outlines, you don't feel loss, you feel continuity, a slow, wide echo. Softer than cannon fire, stronger than any king. The rain has passed, but the village is still damp with change. You walk slowly along the same footpaths you once helped clear, now laced with moss and edged in flowering weeds. A few huts stand empty, tidy, swept, their hammocks coiled like question marks. The mango cart is gone. The breadfruit tree casts its shade on fewer shoulders, but it's not sad. Not really. It's like finding an old shirt in the bottom of a trunk, still warm with memory, no longer worn, but never discarded. Life continues here, just quieter. You take up simple tasks now, feeding goats, teaching the littlest ones how to wind rope without tying themselves to trees. Writing down stories for the girl who embroiders history into fabric. She's started a new tapestry, a long meandering scene of stew pots, mango trees, and what appears to be a courtroom presided over by a chicken. There's comfort in the slowness. In the morning, you mend nets with a neighbor who hums the same sea song every day without ever getting the words right. In the afternoon, you meet with the handful of remaining council members to discuss a proposal for a new communal compost pile. It passes unanimously after a brief joke about goat contributions. At night, by the fire, you retell the old tales, not just to the children, but to yourself. About the Great Spoon debate, the mango ration scandal, the time someone tried to declare independence from Libertalia and was gently reminded they had no cooking skills and owed 3 coconuts in back taxes. You laugh, you sigh, you remember. Historians still wonder if communities like this one simply melted into the forest or into the local populations, their unique identities blurred by time. There are theories, excavations, heated debates, but few consider that perhaps the fading was not a failure, but a form of triumph. Because maybe the greatest measure of Libertalia isn't how long it stood, maybe it's how deeply it was lived. You see it in the way the kids play. They argue over votes. They mediate with sticks and stones arranged like a courtroom. One child insists on being called Captain Justice. No one argues. You see it in the way a visitor from upriver pauses at the sight of your community's circle of stools and says, "You don't sit above each other." You shake your head, and she smiles. That evening, she joins the stew circle. She adds nutmeg and a story about river spirits who settle disagreements with dance contests. It's added to the oral record immediately. You sit back, full and tired, your eyes on the smoke curling toward the stars. Libertalia is no longer loud, but it still speaks, and you are still listening. It's planting season again. The rains have returned, soaking the soil, loosening roots, and urging new life from seeds you almost forgot were there. You kneel beside a small patch of earth behind your hut, digging gently, fingers muddy and warm. This is the rhythm now. Plant, wait, grow. Not every plot is tended these days. Some are overgrown, others repurposed into gathering spots or playgrounds. But enough hands remain, and the soil is forgiving. Breadfruit trees sway above, their broad leaves whispering familiar songs when the wind moves just right. You're joined by one of the newer children, born here after the French visit, after the Great Meeting. She's never known a world without Libertalia. She doesn't understand why people would fight over who gets to sit where, or who makes the rules. To her, democracy is normal. Cooperation is assumed. Parrots yelling legal terms is just Tuesday. She helps you plant yams, her hands half the size of yours, but twice as quick. She hums a tune you don't know, one she made up herself about a brave goat and a cursed mango. You chuckle. You promise to teach it to the parrot. As you work, she asks questions. Is it true you used to be a pirate? You nod. Did you have a sword? Once, you say. But I traded it for a hammock. Why? You pause, pat the soil down, and smile. Because the hammock never stabbed anyone. She seems satisfied with that. Later, the council meets. Not because it must, but because it wants to. There are only a few items on the agenda: approving a new stew rotation, discussing whether the annual festival should include a retired goat parade, and deciding on a name for the village library that now contains over a dozen bark-leaf scrolls and one suspiciously romantic poem written by a very shy fisherman. Mina proposes the Archive of Agreement. It passes, 7 votes to 1. The one abstained, insisting the library should be named after his favorite mango tree. Historians still puzzle over how a society like this could endure, without kings, without armies, without wealth. But they're looking for the wrong things. The roots of Libertalia were never in stone walls or treasure chests. They were in the habits people formed, sharing food, settling disputes with humor, listening first, talking second. Even now, those habits hold. Even now, people still show up to council, still offer help before they're asked, still clap politely when someone tries out a new stew recipe, even if it includes experimental coconut curd. You walk home beneath a sky streaked with sunset. You pass a goat sleeping on someone's porch, a string of lanterns swaying over the path, the smell of cassava roasting in the air. You're not just remembering Libertalia anymore. You're living it, still. And in the dirt beneath your fingernails, the laughter echoing across the clearing, and the girl humming her goat song beside a bed of new yams. You feel the roots deepening. Not into history, but into forever. Today you open the old chest. It's not locked. It never was. Just wedged beneath a shelf in the corner of your hut, half covered in a worn cloth and guarded by a goat that seems to think it's her throne. Inside are scraps of memory, frayed rope from the first council shelter, a scrap of bark with the original stew guidelines scrawled in something that may or may not be fermented papaya ink, and the ceremonial leadership coconut, still faintly carved with a frown. You pull it all out, one item at a time, laying each gently on the floor. Around you, the hut creaks, but holds. Outside, the sun dapples the ground through breadfruit leaves, and the parrot squawks softly in its sleep from a perch above your door. Vote first, nap second. It's been years since the first vote, since the first stew, since the first barefoot debate about mango trade policy and whether hats with feathers should be mandatory at festivals. And still, Libertalia hums. Fewer people live here now, just a handful of families, a few elder council members, a small schoolroom carved from an old canoe warehouse. But its presence is stronger than ever. Not in numbers, but in clarity. You see it every time someone invites a stranger to dinner without asking where they're from. You see it when children argue over game rules, pause, and then suggest a vote. Pebble in one basket, shell in another. You see it when people gather not because they're required, but because they still believe something wonderful can happen when humans talk instead of fight. Not everything is perfect, of course. Goats still wander off with important documents. The mango wine still sparks the occasional overly passionate stew debate. But no one expects perfection, only participation. Historians will never find monuments here. No royal graves, no columns carved with blood-soaked heroics, just stories. Just laughter, just driftwood signs and hand-woven hammocks, fading under the sun, but holding firm. You take a long walk to the shore. The tide's coming in. Across the waves, the world churns with change. Empires rise and fall. Flags are planted, battles are fought, maps are redrawn. And yet, Libertalia remains, not untouched, but untamed, a dot on no official map, but etched in every soul who's ever known that freedom needn't be loud to last, that gentleness can govern, that sometimes all a society needs is stew, sincerity, and the shared understanding that goats do not, in fact, belong in the council hut. You return the items to the chest, pausing only at the coconut. You smile, place it on the windowsill, and whisper, maybe one more term. Outside, a child is gathering shells for a vote. You hear giggles. A goat bleats. Someone hums a lullaby about a courtroom chicken. You close the lid and exhale. The waves are calm today. Not still, never still, but calm, like they've settled into knowing their place, their rhythm, their role in the song of this island. You walk the shoreline one last time, your feet bare, your pace slow. The breeze carries the scent of roasted breadfruit and warm earth, the kind of scent that feels like memory itself. Libertalia hasn't vanished. It hasn't collapsed or fallen or disappeared into jungle vines. It has become no longer a project, no longer an escape, no longer a question. Now it's just life. Simple, generous, and profoundly strange in all the best ways. There's no farewell parade, no grand ceremony, just a few of your neighbors, those who remain, gathering for the usual council circle. Someone's baked yam cakes, someone else plays a wooden flute. The parrot, of course, insists on opening the meeting with a dramatic cry of, "No kings!" An extra nap time. You sit with them, you talk, you laugh. You vote, this time on whether to paint the new meeting bench blue or green. It ends in a tie. A third color is invented on the spot. And then, as the sun dips low, the question comes, what next? Not for the village, it will continue, but for you. Because even here, time turns forward. Seasons shift, and your story, your chapter in this odd and wonderful place, is drawing gently to its close. You spend your final evening walking the paths one more time. The murals on the old council wall, the stew pots still in use, the footprints left by 100 bare feet before yours. You pause at the breadfruit tree, run your fingers along the bark, and feel the deep, solid heartbeat of a home that grew out of nothing but salt, sweat, kindness, and the absolute refusal to be ruled. Then in the morning you pack, not much. A satchel, some dried mango, a scroll or two. The parrot declines to join you. He's taken up mentoring a new generation of loud birds. They squawk with promise, he tells you solemnly. You leave quietly. But not alone, because Libertalia isn't just behind you, it's within you. In your habits, in your stories, in the way you'll someday walk into another village, help dig a garden, and casually suggest a vote when someone disagrees about whose turn it is to fetch water. And that's the secret. Libertalia was never just a place, it was a seed, and seeds don't stay in one spot forever. They travel, they root, they grow where they're needed. And someday, someone, maybe someone you'll never meet, will sit under a different tree, in a different time and say, let's do it the old way, let's vote, let's share. Let's build this together. And someone else will smile and ask, like Libertalia? And the story will begin again. Sweet dreams.